point out is that in terms of other bad news for the Tory party, one of their best communicators, Gillian Anderson, it's been accepted both by the Tories and by the Lib Dems.
You mean Gillian Keegan?
What did I say?
Gillian Anderson.
Oh, yeah, right. So
they're easily confused.
that time of the morning.
You've been watching.
It would be great if Gillian Anderson was standing, but it turns out she's not. Gillian Keegan. So Gillian Keegan.
Robert, it's only 2:20. You can't go confusing them until at least 4 in the morning.
There are going to be lots of other amusing mistakes before morning. But anyway, Gillian Keegan.
She's not going to complain, to be clear about this. Sorry.
Anyway, good communicator.
Yeah.
And
she's gone.
She's gone.
OK.
And it hasn't been formally announced, but the Lib Dems are claiming it. Tories are conceding privately. It's over.
One of the interesting things about the Ashfield result is it wasn't actually one of the top results in the exit poll expected for Reform. It's just a little story about how it feels on election night. You look at one of those seats and you say, OK, well, maybe Reform are going to hit the 13, and then you see a Hartlepool result declared for Labour, and that was actually one of the seats that Reform were expected to take.
OK.
So maybe these things balance out.
We're just about to get Keir Starmer's declaration at Holborn. Not exactly a knife edge, but, you know, our first chance to hear him and hear what he's got to say. So we'll go to that as soon as we get it. Nicola, can I just ask you about Douglas Alexander being back in? Obviously, somebody I guess you would know pretty well over the years. Not a particular surprise.
I mean, probably the least surprising of the Scottish results tonight. It was the most marginal SNP Labour constituency. I think only needed a swing of 2%, probably more than that. It was also a seat where the SNP MP elected then defected to Alex Salmond's outfit, so a bit of history there. So, you know, congratulations to Douglas, but not a surprise in any way, shape or form. His campaigners, so I understand, have been going around telling everybody he's going to be the next Foreign Secretary, so that might be news to David Lammy.
Yeah, well, it certainly might. Is that true?
Well, I think it's actually a really important moment, not because of what job Douglas Alexander gets, but the fact that you will have a big Labour beast who is Scottish. And this has been such a problem. If you think back to 1997, when Labour came into government, you had Donald Dewar, you had George Robertson, you had
Robin Cook,
a whole series
Alistair Darling,
big Scottish figures who were both Labour and Westminster and Scottish. And there's been none of those now for Labour for so long. So you were either Scottish or you were in Westminster. You couldn't be both. And that is such a problem for Labour because it looks like it's not a Scottish unionist party in Westminster. And so Douglas Alexander being back, if I were Keir Starmer, I would need him in my government because I would want a big Scottish beast in my government somewhere. That's the important thing.
Doesn't that get difficult, though, when you've had all these people who've been shadowing and then you have to... I mean, these are the decisions of leadership, right? They're not very easy.
I don't think you'll get a big job immediately. I don't think he'll become the Foreign Secretary immediately or anything like that. But you know, it is very hard for Labour if it looks like in Westminster it's an English or Welsh but not a Scottish party. And, you know, to be fair, only having one Labour MP, or now two, has made that very difficult. You need, quickly, some Scottish cabinet members.
Even without, I mean, you know, I take that point, but I think it's inconceivable that Douglas Alexander wouldn't be in a Labour government pretty quickly. You know,
here he is. Sorry, Nicola. This is to state the blindingly obvious. This is our new Prime Minister in waiting, arriving at his count in Holborn, which he's clearly going to win easily with his wife. He looks pretty happy. And why wouldn't you? Because he's pulled off what looks, to all intents and purposes, like a historic victory. I think is a historic victory, we can pretty much say by now. Chatting to people, looking relaxed. Ought to know how to conduct yourself, I guess, at moments like this, right? You've won, you don't want to look too triumphant, but you do want to look...
It's a good problem to have, Tom. The scale of problems to have. How to behave as the Prime Minister in waiting at your count.
When you've won.
Yeah, Labour have won Rushcliffe, Ken Clark's old seat, I'm just being told.
And they've also won Colchester.
Yes, we mentioned that. James Cracknell.
These things. And Redcar has gone through. And Cannock Chase, which was down about 300 on the target list, been trending Conservative for a long time, but of course another seat that Labour had during the Blair years.
And Wrexham, as we look at Keir Starmer, centre of framing.
Ryan Reynolds' country.
Yeah,
Ryan Reynolds' country, yeah.
What's interesting about...
And your friend Alex Chalk, I'm afraid, we expected it.
In Cheltenham, gone.
I mean, he clung on last time, just.
It's quite striking with some of these Welsh seats and also in the exit poll that Labour isn't getting punished for the Welsh Labour government that has had, a high degree of dissatisfaction, it seems. So Labour's going to do very well, it looks like, in Wales, and the Conservatives could be facing the kind of wipeout that they last experienced in 2001.
So incumbency has been a big problem for the Conservatives in England.
Yeah.
Incumbency a problem for the SNP in
Absolutely.
Scotland. There's been lots of problems for Welsh Labour in Cardiff.
Exactly.
And
which is why I think it's so
First Minister's been
fascinating.
censured there, and yet doesn't seem to be affecting the Labour performance.
Exactly.
So here's Keir Starmer shaking hands, preparing to. I mean, we haven't even got to the declaration yet, but that seems a little bit beside the point in this constituency.
There were lots of Keir Starmer. We're in his constituency here, this studio, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I believe
There were
we are.
lots of Keir Starmer posters as I arrived at the studio, all in the houses around.
Well, listen, I think you can say, can you not, with a degree of certainty, he fought an incredibly effective campaign. I mean, like, if we're really being honest about it.
Well, there wasn't one mistake, Tom, really. There was not one bad photo opportunity. There was not one, angry encounter with a voter. There was not one policy that fell apart. I mean, the only exception was
disciplined.
The only exception was the kind of couple of days dealing with Diane Abbott right towards the beginning of the campaign. But other than that, it was the most disciplined campaign.
The veterans would say they've not seen a campaign like this. I mean, I think this is better than the campaigns I've seen in the last 20, 30 years.
It was remarkable, because as somebody was, following, both camps around, I have to say, the Tory campaign was about the most shambolic campaign I've ever come across. Really weird decisions being taken all the time. It's sort of captured by that last day when they went on great ITV programme this morning and, is sort of photographed talking to Britain's most tattooed mum with her clothes off and reveals that his favourite meal is a sandwich. I really struggle to believe anybody could have thought that would have swayed
aren't the two things
any votes whatsoever.
I don't want to. I think Labour have fought a good campaign, but it hasn't been put under significant pressure because the Tory campaign has been so utterly shambolic. And so, in a sense, they've had the space to run a flawless campaign that they might not otherwise have.
Kind of, but the media puts them under pressure, and the pressure comes from whether you step or misstep. And actually, to go through a whole campaign where you've not had a single big Keir Starmer mishap on the road, where you've not had a day where you had a noises off moment, a leak, which has kind of caused you embarrassment, a policy unravelling. I mean, it's just very, very unusual. Look, we can sit and say, would we have run this campaign? Would we wanted more of a mandate? All those things. But just within the context of a political campaign, it's been brilliant.
I tell you, I just didn't understand the Tory campaign. From beginning to end, I just didn't
understand. They did,
Well, I think that's probably right.
I mean, I think you could understand what they were trying to do at the outset, which was to try to get the undecided voters back and to try to get. It was the so-called reform squeeze, right?
Yeah.
So the idea was that if you talked about national service for young people, this would somehow mobilise those reform voters, convince them that the Conservative Party was the party for them. They didn't need to go to Nigel Farage. Of course, it's backfired. But that was, I think, the thinking behind it. And of course, it hasn't happened. In fact, if anything, they've pushed more people away.
If you call the campaign and you surprise everyone, the people who shouldn't be most surprised are your own HQ. And although it took a few days for the Labour Party to kind of get into gear, they did get into gear. And I also thought this of the Starmer campaign. Sometimes you can fall into the trap of seeing remote, not connected with people. He didn't really attract that charge. He didn't look particularly flustered. He wasn't always front and centre.
He wasn't as fleet on his feet in the debates as he might have been.
You're right. He lost the debates.
We're obviously, as we're watching Keir Starmer arriving at his count, making his very slow way to the stage in order to hear his declaration. Charlene is there. Charlene, looks like quite an atmosphere, I have to say, from where we're sitting.
Well, it is, and I think he's making his slow way there because he's not due to get to his results until about 2:45, so he can enjoy a victory lap of sorts, I suppose. Look, as you've been saying, I don't think anyone's under any illusions that he is likely to win this for Labour because it's a safe Labour seat. But he's surrounded by supporters. You said you don't know how someone's supposed to, act when they haven't officially won or officially become Prime Minister as yet. But I think he's doing a rather good job. He's surrounded by so many supporters here at the Holborn and St Pancras account. And as I said, in about 10 minutes or so, he'll take to that stage and he'll find out exactly what his majority is. I mean, last time round it was 27,000. So it'll be interesting to see whether that takes a dip or whether or not that has gone up. But, you know, we are looking now, if I look at these shots now, you've got all of the press hanging around taking pictures of him as well as the supporters. And, you know, this is an interesting time for his wife Victoria, of course, because she's been thrown into the spotlight in a way that we have never seen before and she's never really experienced before. So I think it's probably more of a difficult situation for her rather than him, what with her husband likely to become Prime Minister tomorrow. But he will take to that stage with all of the other candidates in the not too distant future, and he will find out for sure exactly what his majority has been. This has been a Labour seat since 1983, since Frank Dobson, of course, until Keir Starmer took over in 2015. So, you know, he knows he's going to win, but it'll be interesting to see whether he's done enough to gain from last time round back in 2019. But, you know, in terms of turnout, there's been a drop turnout-wise in his constituency. I believe last time round it was 59.1%. This time round it's 54%, a slight dip, but a dip nevertheless. And as you've been explaining, Tom, throughout the programme, it's something that is reflected elsewhere in terms of constituencies. There has been a slight drop in those people that would historically come out to vote. So, you know, the turnout taking a drop here is almost unsurprising, I suppose. But I guess what is important for Keir Starmer is to whether or not he's done enough to you know, go up from where he was at in 2019, because actually in 2019 he took a drop of about 3,000 from the time before. But as you've said before, he has done no missteps in terms of this campaign, and I'm guessing that his constituents will show him that, and they will have appreciated that. One would hope, he would hope that they have appreciated that, and he would hope that people have gone out and voted for him. But you know, as I've said, we've got, let me take a look, just under 10 minutes until he finds out for sure that he has definitely done enough to win the majority here. But as you know only too well, Tom, this is a safe seat. He knows he's going to win.
OK, Charlene, thank you very much indeed. Let's come back in here. Colin, you got some things to say. Rochdale is a Labour
That's what I was
seat.
Wanting to tell you, Tom. Rochdale is...
I've spoiled your surprise.
No, not at all.
But it was on the screen.
I saw it there too. But you were concentrating so hard on what Charlene had to tell you.
OK, hold on a sec. Let's take the Rochdale Declaration.
Important.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a declaration of the result of the poll for the election of a Member of Parliament for Rochdale on Thursday, 4th July 2024. I, Steve Rumblow, being the acting returning officer at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at this election is as follows. Paul Simon Ellison, the Conservative Party, 4,273. George Galloway, Workers' Party, 11,587. Michael David Howard, Reform UK, 6,773. Andrew John Kelly, Liberal Democrats, 2,816. Martin David Savin, Green Party, 1,212. Paul Waugh, Labour and Cooperative Party, 13,027. I hereby declare that Paul Waugh is duly elected.
Well, there you have it. Paul Waugh, who was a political journalist, originally of The Standard and then The Independent. Niche knowledge, used to sit right behind me when I was political editor of ITV for 10 years. He sat in the desk right behind me in the small room we shared with other political journalists. He is now...
Could have been you, Tom.
No, couldn't have been. There you go. I mean, should we hear a little bit of what he's got to say? Let's have a...
Possible. I'd like to thank George Galloway for his service. I particularly want to pay tribute to... Are we going to be allowed to speak? Is this a democracy? Are we going to be allowed to speak? I particularly want to pay tribute to the late Sir Tony Lloyd, whose decency and compassion are still an example to every one of us. But of course, my biggest thanks go to the people of Rochdale, of Littleborough, of Wardle...
OK, one way or another, that declaration didn't feel like it was going very well. George Galloway was not there.
Very bad loser. He stood for the Scottish Parliament in, I think, 2011 in Glasgow, and when he sat in the car park for most of the count, and then when it was clear he wasn't getting elected, he just drove off. He didn't ever come into the count.
It is a
clearly, he
significant win
doesn't.
It's one way of dealing with losing, I suppose.
I mean, I said earlier that it looked as though Labour were going to win, and they have. And this is significant for Labour. I have to say, in the last few days, talking to activists on the ground, they did think Galloway stood a very good chance of keeping the seat, so they will be deeply relieved.
It's very close, and again, Reform have probably made an impact.
Yeah.
It is an interesting thing, though, isn't it, about our Parliament, that sometimes you can be a big significant figure on the outside, and then when you get into Parliament, you have much less impact. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has had almost no impact in Parliament since he stopped being Labour leader and then having the Labour whip. George Galloway, as far as I can see, had no impact since he won that Rochdale seat. Back in the day when Alex Salmond was in Parliament, he had much less impact when he was a parliamentarian in a small SNP than he did subsequently in Scottish politics. And you just wonder, if Nigel Farage does win Clacton, we'll see that later on, I mean, is Nigel Farage going to have the impact in Parliament in a small seat that he has as the outsider insurgent? I
mean, the rules of the House of Commons are very cruel towards independents or very small parties. You know, you just don't get
Explain
called.
that. You don't.
Well, because, you know, things like Prime Minister's questions. I mean, the Liberal Democrats have struggled under this in recent years. Once the SNP replaced them as the third party, the SNP were always called at Prime Minister's questions, and Ed Davey had to bob up and down trying to get the Speaker's attention. And that will be true of Nigel Farage. He can win 20% of the vote or whatever he gets. But if he... You know, if he's only got a couple of MPs, and by the way, you know, Hartlepool has just gone by, and Labour won that, and that was a seat that people thought maybe Reform would win. So you might have a big disproportionate impact on the election. You might, as Ed say, be a big insurgent force outside. But inside the House of Commons, Nigel Farage bopping up and down, maybe being called once every 5 weeks.
Well, speaking of the Lib Dems and the Lib Dem leader, we're about to hear his declaration.
Notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the election is as follows. Ali Abdizai Abdullah, Workers' Party, 395. Jason Chinnery, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 230.
Thank you.
Deberti Das, the Green Party, 3,009. Edward Jonathan Davey, Liberal Democrats, 25,870. Helen Margaret Edward, the Conservative Party candidate, 8,635. Mark David Fox, Reform UK, 4,787. Eugene O'Dane, Labour Party, 6,561. Eunice, apologies, Eunice. Yvonne Tracy, Kingston Independent Residents Justice for Sub-Postmasters, 1,177. Therefore, I give notice that Edward Jonathan Davey is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Kingston and Surbiton constituency.
Ed Davey back in Kingston and Surbiton. No big surprise there. We'll wait in a moment and hear what he's got to say in his speech. Colin, can I just bring you in to talk about what change there is and isn't here? Let's just have a look at the change in the share of the vote.
Yeah, he's down.
Significant drop in turnout, I'm told.
Yes, we've been seeing that all over the place tonight.
Yeah.
But Ed Davies votes down a bit. Leaders of parties usually get a bit of a boost. People like having leaders as their local members of parliament. But Davey, of course, lost this seat and won it back.
Sorry, Colin, just to interrupt you very rudely, but let's hear what he's got to say.
Surbiton and this great community over many years. And I'm humbled that you've given me the chance to serve you again. So let me start by saying a big thank you. And thank you to Sarah and all the returning officer team and to all the staff and police who've worked so hard through the night. You are the unsung heroes of our democracy. It simply wouldn't work without you. And thank you to my fellow candidates for making this a campaign we can all be proud of. I wish you all well in the future. Now, I don't know if you could tell, but I've rather enjoyed this campaign. But what I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future. People who are working hard, raising families, caring for loved ones, playing by the rules, but finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. People who've had to wait hours for an ambulance, weeks to see a GP, or months for urgent cancer treatment. People who are angry at the filthy sewage being pumped into their rivers, lakes, and onto their beaches. People who feel let down and taken for granted and are desperate for change. Many of them have turned to the Liberal Democrats, in some cases for the first time at this election, and we want to be your champions. We've listened to you, and we've heard you loud and clear. We've put your concerns at the heart of our campaign. Number one amongst them, fixing the health and care crisis, so that you can see a doctor or find an NHS dentist when you need them, and so your loved ones get the high-quality care when you need it, where you need it. And that's what Liberal Democrat MPs will fight for every day in the next Parliament. I've shared my own caring story during this campaign, and I've been overwhelmed by the response, especially from fellow carers. People looking after their loved ones who've got in touch to say, that's my story too. And I'm grateful that we've been able to bring caring out of the shadows in this campaign. And we will continue to stand up for a society where we value care and properly support carers, because we cannot afford not to. Let me finish by thanking my wonderful family, even though I hope they're sound asleep. Emily, I love you, and I could not have done this without you. Ellie and John, I love you so much. And to our fantastic team, thank you so much. This would not have happened without you. My election agent, Simon Drage, organiser, Cosmo Lupton. and our whole incredible team.
Okay, there we are. Ed Davey back in Kingston.
Liberal Democrat campaigners.
Not sure there was terribly much to draw out of his speech. A lot of thank yous, fair enough. George, you sat in cabinet with him. What do you think of Ed Davey?
Well, he was a very serious, not terribly exciting member of the cabinet, and if I had brought my party back from nothing, or next to nothing, and had this great win, I think I would have been a bit more animated and excited. And maybe there's a reason why he didn't do so many speeches and spent more time doing bungee jumps.
Okay. Ed, do you have a view on bungee jumping?
Well, I was surprised he
agreed to do it. Tactics in the end or not? I mean, that's what I can't decide. Part of me thinks it is really hard. Like, if you're the SNP in Scotland, you're guaranteed media attention. If you're the Tory party or the Labour Party in England, you're guaranteed media attention. If you're the Lib Dems, it's always hard, right?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm not criticising them. I just think it's wrong to assume that because of all these stunts, that's the reason they've done well tonight. They've done well tonight because of the politics. The stunts are neither here nor there, and if they hadn't done well, we'd all be sitting here saying how silly that was and what a big mistake that was, and instead we're sitting here saying, no, it was a stroke of genius. In actual fact, it got them attention, but it's not the reason for their showing tonight.
I like the stunts, but I always kind of wanted him to take that into, the stunts get you attention, and what do you use the attention for? And Rob says he did do that on social care, but, on other things, he just sat on the fence. Do you think we should talk about the first Scottish result?
No.
Why? Kilmarnock is in, and it was a 22% swing from the SNP to Labour, which is it's a big result.
Yeah, it's a big result. Look, I mean, I think that would be the pattern, maybe not quite to that scale, but that would be the pattern across SNP Labour seats tonight. That, interestingly, was a seat where Labour had fallen into third place in the last election, so it's a big result for Labour. But Kilmarnock is a seat that Labour used to hold. Des Brown used to be the MP for Kilmarnock.
OK, here we are. Sorry to jump in, but as you can see, this is Nigel Farage arriving at his seat in Clacton.
Yeah, Stephen's won, yeah.
I mean, no real doubt that Nigel Farage is going to win, Colin, or do you think there is doubt?
Well, you wouldn't imagine so, looking at some of these results. I mean, look at for Mark Francois, who we were talking about earlier, who's all intents and purposes a kind of a Brexity member of the Conservative Party. It didn't save him from a 30% swing plus in his very safe seat in Essex. That, I think, was the 8th safest Conservative seat in the country. This is the 9th safest Conservative seat in the country. If you put the Farage factor on top of it, and apparently the Labour candidate was pulled out and sent to campaign somewhere else halfway through the election anyway. That sounds like people throwing their hands up to me. But we're still waiting to see.
Stephen Flynn has held his seat in Aberdeen North, contrary to the exchange between them.
I think there's also just if you think about how, so we've seen Keir Starmer very controlled, no media interviews. Rishi Sunak hasn't appeared at all tonight. This is the Nigel Farage style of politics, just a walking press conference the whole time. He'll give any interview to anyone who he wants, and it's just sort of interesting. I mean, there's also Trump does that, of course, in America, and it's
Boris Johnson always did.
And Boris Johnson is a sort of rolling commentary, and it's a very, it's worked very well, obviously. Some elections,
I hate to.
It was Kirsty Blackman and Aberdeen said, but I am reliably informed Stephen Flynn has.
OK, I was going to say I was very nervous about contradicting former First Minister about the difference between North and South Aberdeen. But
it was Kirsty Blackman has held a seat in Aberdeen North, but I am reliably informed that Stephen has also held a seat in Aberdeen South.
OK, now we have enough real results in from the early counts. Our psephologists are telling me we are ready to move from the exit poll to our first ITV News forecast. This is about analysing and modelling information from real results to refine the exit poll's initial projection as the night goes on. So the first ITV News forecast shows an even bigger Labour landslide than the exit poll. We are forecasting the Conservatives are on 130 and Labour with 414, up by 4 from the exit poll. The Lib Dems on 60, Reform on 10. That's down 3 from the exit poll, and the SNP on 11. Colin, you can explain a little more how we moved from exit poll to forecast.
Well, when constituency results come in, we obviously look at the results themselves, but then we think about the kinds of places that they've come from, the sort of population who live there, comparison with previous elections, and then we model them against seats we haven't heard from. Remember, we've only heard from about 10% of constituencies, even at this late hour in the morning or early hour in the morning. But by modelling them statistically, you hope to be able to make a judgment about what is likely to happen through the rest of the night. So this isn't an awful long way away from what the exit poll forecast initially said, but this is now our own ITV news forecast, bringing in the skills of the team we've got working upstairs.
OK. Can I just double-check something? Nicola, are we sure Stephen Flynn's back in?
I am
reliably informed.
Told by people on the ground. I may be misinformed, but I'm being told by people on the ground.
I haven't got any information to the contrary, but are these kind of people who only tell you when they're absolutely sure they're right, or are they people?
I hope so.
OK. So there we are. A Labour landslide. That much hasn't changed in the course of this evening. It's going up. We're very nearly at bigger than Blair majority, unless I'm misreading that.
Tom,
2 more.
Tom, do you think Tony Blair likes this result? It's a great Labour win, but it's one short of the majority.
Yeah.
And two big Lib Dem wins while we've been talking there. In Torbay, which of course they've held before, and Chelmsford, which they've been pretty close to in the past, but I don't think they have held either.
OK, well, listen, one change on the screen, as you can see there, is that there has been a little bit of a dip in what we're predicting for reform. We said 13, now we're saying 10. Even I can do the maths that's down at this stage in the evening. Anushka, explain why. What's going on?
There's lots of chatter online at the moment about what is going on with Reform UK, what was going on with the exit poll. These are our seats that have been declared so far. They are coming in thick and fast, 69, 70, I think, now. Now, the thing that everyone's talking about is that some of the seats that were predicted for Reform, for example, Barnsley North, here on the left, has actually gone to Labour. And if I highlight Barnsley South, just below it, it has actually gone to Labour. And also, if we have a quick look at Hartlepool as well, it has also gone to Labour. And Ashfield, which has gone to Reform UK, didn't come up as Reform UK on the exit poll. So I think one thing people are asking is what is going on with this? And just to kind of explain it, the exit poll gives a prediction for every seat, as I've been saying, and it gives a probability. Loads of them are too close to call. And in fact, when we first got the spreadsheets, there were fewer than the 13 Reform UK seats predicted on the list actually coloured up as Reform. So how do they end up there? Well, Colin will tell you more about the very complicated way in which they actually calculate all the different probabilities and come up with those seat numbers and bring it down. But Reform is particularly difficult to try and judge. It hasn't been a party before, it's a small number, and that's one of the reasons this is happening. Does that mean that Reform UK are not having a big impact tonight? It does not. So, in fact, I don't know what the updated number is, but loads and loads and loads of these seats, which have actually declared, have Reform in second place. And I can show you the change in vote share across the seats that we've seen so far, and you can see it there. So look at that. Tories down 19.6, Labour up 1.7, the Reform vote up 13.4%, and also an increase there for the Green Party. So everyone's talking about it, and we're just trying to understand it, but that's to explain to viewers why we think we are where we are at the moment.
So the Reform, you know, there's quite a possibility of further change, is really what we're saying, in the Reform seat number. There's a lot of things out there that are a bit too close to call.
I think there's loads of seats that are too close to call, and it is very difficult, in particular with Reform, to understand what's happening. But I think the one thing I do want to say is that they are clearly having an impact on the race more clearly. One thing that some of the experts were talking to us about before was the fact that there are more and more seats now where you have 3 parties, and the introduction of the third party is actually letting Labour up through the middle in some of these seats, and that's one thing that we're seeing happening.
OK, we're just looking at a live shot of Clacton there. Nigel Farage, you saw arriving just a little minute ago. We were talking about the fact that he likes to have a rolling press conference wherever he went. So he was sort of talking to journalists as he arrived. I think at this stage we're probably assuming he has a very good chance of winning Clacton, but who knows? We will see. We are also about to go and have the declaration at Holborn, where Keir Starmer will, of course, win. But it will be, presumably, I would imagine he spent a long time working on his speech. It's the first time we'll have heard him effectively as victor I guess, Ed, it's a pretty important speech, really. Even if it is going to be delivered in the middle of the night, it's the first moment we've heard from him as the Prime Minister to be.
It is, but he will want his big moment speech to be his speech in Downing Street tomorrow, symbolically. That's what. I mean, it's his overnight words, but this will not be this speech of poetry and aspiration and vision, because I think he'll hold that for tomorrow. So we'll see.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Labour have won Bolsover back, Dennis Skinner's old seat. We should mention, and we are going to Holborn now, where they're walking onto the stage. I always think they're difficult, those speeches. You remember Blair's last speeches? He did one to party conference and one at his constituency in Sedgefield, and they were both, whether you liked Blair or didn't, they were both, I think you'd agree, they were both brilliant speeches, and they were sort of different. And I thought that was a unique skill, to deliver two really impactful speeches. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's go to Holborn to put me out of my misery.
Rowlands, being the acting returning officer at the election held in the Holborn and St Pancras constituency on the 4th of July 2024, do hereby give notice that the number of votes cast for each candidate in the election was as follows. Nick, the Incredible Flying Brick, the official monster raving loony party, 162. Charlie Clinton, Liberal Democrats, 2,236. Andrew Joseph Feinstein, 7,312. Wise Islam Independent, 636. Senthul Kumar Independent, 40. Mireen Malik, the Conservative Party candidate, 2,776. John Edmund Poynton, UK Independence Party, 75. David Roberts, Reform UK, 2,371. Tom Scripps, Socialist Equality Party, 61. Bobby Elmo Smith, 19. David Robert Stansel, Green Party, 4,030. Keir Starmer, Labour Party, 18,884. The total number of votes cast across Holborn and St Pancras constituency at the UK parliamentary election on the 4th of July 2024 was 38,602. The total number of ballot papers rejected was 223, and they were rejected for the following reasons: want of official mark, 0, voting for more than one candidate, 73, writing or mark by which the voter can be identified, 2, unmarked or void for uncertainty, 148. Therefore, I hereby declare that Keir Starmer has been duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Holborn and St Pancras constituency.
There we are. Keir Starmer is back in Holborn, but as we've just been scratching our heads about here, we think his vote is 10,000 or so down, which more than 10,000 down. Let's take his speech and then we'll talk about it.
It is a huge privilege to be re-elected to serve this constituency, the incredible community of Holborn and St Pancras. My home, where my kids have grown up, where my wife was born. And I have to thank Vic and my family more than anyone for their love and support and for keeping me totally grounded. Thank you, Vic. And thank you so much to the police and the returning officer for making sure every voice is heard and every vote is counted. And thank you to Andy White, a fantastic agent, the campaign team, the local party, and all the volunteers who've worked so hard over the last 6 weeks and beyond every door knocked, every leaflet delivered, every conversation had. It makes a massive difference. And lastly, I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates who put themselves forward for public service. Because in this room, right here, beats the heart of our democracy, not in Westminster or Whitehall, but in town halls and community centres up and down the country, in polling stations and voting booths, and most of all, in the hands of the people who hold the power of the vote. It all starts here. And it starts with you. Change begins in this community, with the people who came together to make life better, like the fantastic councillors who work so hard for our area. Service starts in this neighbourhood. The groups, the faith communities, the local organisations who serve week in, week out. And hope starts with that one kid from Somerstown who dares to believe that the future belongs to her. And with Labour, it will. Because I promise this, whether you voted for me or not, I will serve every person in this constituency. The mothers I sat with who've lost children to knife crime, the pensioners who can't get the doctor's appointments they desperately need, the local businesses who've struggled so hard to keep their head above water. I will speak out for you, have your back, fight your corner every single day. Because tonight, people here and around the country have spoken, and they're ready for change, to end the politics of performance and return to politics as public service. The change begins right here, because this is your democracy, your community, and your future. You have voted. It is now time for us to deliver. Thank you very much.
Well, Keir Starmer there giving his first speech as the prospective Prime Minister, but managing to mislay 10,000 plus votes, which I think requires some explanation. Who wants to go first, Robert?
I did a bit about it. I mean, the 7,000 votes went to a candidate called Andrew Feinstein, who was campaigning largely on a platform of criticising Labour's approach to Gaza, and within that part of North London, that is a criticism that has resonated, and we're seeing this in other parts of the country as well. So, and he's an independent, so those are just 7,000 votes that more naturally would have gone to Keir Starmer, and again, it's a pretty low turnout.
Colin,
I've got a couple of results from Essex, Tom, which I think are quite interesting. Labour have gained Harlow and they've gained Thurrock as well, both of which, again, are seats they've had in the relatively recent past. But what's fascinating here is in both of those seats, the Conservative vote declined from in the 60s by half, fully half of the Conservative vote disappeared. In both of those seats, Robert Halfon has stood down in Harlow, but Jackie Doyle-Price was trying to get re-elected in Thurrock. Where have those votes gone? Well, yeah, they've gone to Labour, but only by 9 or 10%. The 20-25% of the vote that the Conservatives have lost seems to have gone to Reform, following the pattern.
Yeah, and the Brexit Party didn't stand there last time, so this is exactly where we're going to see the Reform Party have the biggest impact. In Leave areas, Harlow voted 66% to Leave.
Absolutely.
Can I just pick up on that a sec? But I just want to see, we can see a reaction to Alex Chalk losing his
duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Cheltenham constituency.
Well, Alex Chalk, Cheltenham was a Liberal Democrat seat, is a Liberal Democrat seat again. First Cabinet Minister, serving Cabinet Minister to lose his seat. not good news for you. He's a friend of yours, George, it's fair to say.
Alex was my research assistant and then became Lord Chancellor, as the way of the world. He's a very nice guy. He's very much on the kind of liberal end of the Conservative Party, would have been an important voice arguing against just heading down the kind of reform rabbit hole. But sadly, he's lost. I mean, he just clung on last time, so he's always been highly vulnerable.
He's a whisker.
I mean, can I just say something about the kind of Keir Starmer, declaration there? So, normally a party leader would add massively to their vote in their constituency. So it speaks something of the kind of interesting tensions in the Labour Party that a Corbynista is taking votes off him. Also, I think kind of the challenge for Keir Starmer, and look, it's a great challenge to have because he's about to be a Prime Minister with a huge majority, is you saw in that speech, he is not electrifying in his communication. He doesn't send a tingle down your spine as you hear from the man who's about to be the Prime Minister. And that, that's a kind of big, job of being a Prime Minister, to be able to communicate. And I think it's going to be one of the issues. Can he reach out to people?
We're just going to leave that for a second because we're going to Grant Shapps' seat.
Ooh. Declaration of results of poll, election of a Member of Parliament for Welwyn Hatfield on Thursday, the 4th of July, 2024. I, Annie Brewster, being the returning officer at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Aaron Jack Oliver, Reform UK, 6,397. Butcher Sarah, the Green Party, 2,986. Lewin Andrew Allen, Labour Party, 19,877. Munro John Peter, Liberal Democrats, 3,117. Shapps Grant, the Conservative Party candidate, 16,078. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more than one candidate, 46. Writing or mark by which voter could be identified, 0. Unmarked or void for uncertainty, 146. The total being 192. The electorate was 75,259. The ballot papers issued were 48,647. The turnout was 64.8%. And I do hereby declare that Andrew Allen Lewin is duly elected as a Member of Parliament for the Welwyn Hatfield constituency.
Grant Shapps gone, second Cabinet Minister. It wasn't even in the end, really very close. Before we really talk about anything else to do with that, he did, when I say Cabinet Minister, he might have been all Cabinet Ministers since he held pretty much every Cabinet post in the course of his career. Let's just have a look. Colin, would you mind just talking us through this? I was going to look at the change in the share of the vote first because let's just see what's happened. That's the overall. Let's have a look at the change.
Surprising result in the context of the night, frankly, Tom. Again, we see what we've been seeing, the pattern. The Labour vote is up to a degree. The Reform vote is up by more. And again, as Jane was saying, this is one of those seats where the Brexit Party would not have contested in 2019. I think Grant Shapps in his heart of hearts would have known that he was, he was toast before the election was called, really.
I mean, I think he did know that, but he's still a very significant defeat for the Tory Party because he was one of the most... there aren't many Tory ministers at the moment better known than Grant Shapps.
I've just been told Leicester East has gone from as a Conservative gain off Labour.
I was wondering whether that might come in. Leicester East is a very interesting constituency, which we could spend a seminar talking about, really. Keith Vaz, the old Labour MP, was standing as a candidate. Claudia Webb, the old Labour MP.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Colin, for 1 second, because we have to go to Chingford and Wood Green, where Ian Duncan-Smith may also be about to lose his seat. Discuss.
This is a very marginal seat
the
for Ian
Chingford and
Duncan-Smith,
Woodford
really.
Green constituency declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Chris Brodie, Green Party, 1,334. Ian Duncan-Smith, the Conservative Party candidate, 17,281. Josh Hadley, Liberal Democrats, 1,275. Paul Lugery, Reform UK, 3,653. Faiza Shaheen, Independent, 12,445. Sharma Tatler, Labour Party candidate, 12,524. Therefore, I give public notice that Ian Duncan-Smith is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green constituency.
Well, blimey. Ian Duncan-Smith, close friend of George Osborne. If you can't see me, you're probably not noticing the sarcasm in my voice. George is smiling at me. Has held on. Leading proponent of Brexit over many years. Eurosceptic, as we used to once call them.
Leader of the Conservative Party.
Leader of the Conservative Party. Quiet man turning up the volume. Maybe we can hang on to hear what he's got to say in a minute. George, you want to jump in?
Well, he won here because the Labour Party deposed its candidate, who thought was too left-wing. She stood, Faiza Shaheen, and she got 12,000 votes, and she completely split the Labour vote. So there's Starmer's ruthlessness kind of not paying off. They didn't win the seat, but maybe he's glad she's not.
People watching the programme will have strong views, but I would tell you the Starmer team will say price worth paying. That's what they'll say. They'll say we won a big majority. We had to show change from the past.
OK, let's just hear a little bit of what he's got to say.
Efficiency and also not a little humour during the course of the night. Can I also thank all the accounting staff, as it's been a late night and you worked incredibly well and very, very efficiently. When we think of some of the other constituencies, it will take a lot longer to get their accounts done. So my thanks to them, and also to the police, of course, as they have been here long hours and have been very helpful during the course of the campaign. I'd like to have a few personal thanks. My thanks, of course, first and foremost to my family for having put up with the last 30-plus years that I've been here, and also, importantly, to all of those who've helped on this campaign, on my campaign, all the councillors and all the volunteers. And I want to have a particular shout-out for Michelle Goldie, who has led this campaign absolutely brilliantly. We've talked nothing but politics now for 6 weeks and walked many yards, and I'm not going to, therefore, use this as an opportunity to make any political statements. What I do want to say, very simply, I want to thank all the candidates who have stood for fighting what has, I think, been a pretty straightforward campaign and absolutely standing by their positions and their values, which, of course, this is what this is all about. But I also would like to say that I pledge myself in this.
OK, there we are. Ian Duncan-Smith is back. We have we're just getting to the beginning, I would say, of rush hour at this point. A lot going on. We're told that Penny Mordaunt, some of her team think she's lost her seat at Portsmouth North, but that there may be a few hundred votes in it. We're about to get Clacton, I think, any second now to see whether Nigel Farage has made it back in. Obviously, we've seen Ian Duncan-Smith hold on there because the original Labour candidate was deselected. Ed just said that the Team Starmer will consider that a price worth paying.
Can I make one?
Yeah.
Just a very quick point at this point. We've seen Shapps go. We're expecting Gillian Keegan to go. We've seen Alex Chalk go. The maximum number of cabinet ministers that have ever gone in a general election was in '97 when 7 went. I would be staggered if we don't see more than 7 cabinet ministers losing their seats tonight. Staggered.
And I think the Chingford result and also the Leicester East result, which we were beginning to talk about, shows the impact in some places of ethnicity now on general elections. And clearly in Chingford, one of those constituencies with quite a high Muslim population, and other places like that through the night we've been seeing the Labour voters being suppressed because of that, because of the controversy over Gars and what have you. And in Leicester East, a very complex situation. In local elections, the Conservatives have been doing pretty well in Leicester in recent times because that's a sort of, it's a Hindu factor. It's the most Hindu constituency in the country, I think. And there was a Conservative candidate from that religion, and then there was Keith Vaz, the ex-MP, as I said, Claudia Webb, the ex-MP, who was had the whip withdrawn from her, contesting the seat, and they just sort of split the Labour vote in half. And because the Conservatives have been doing so well in Leicester in campaigning in that particular ethnic community, they got enough of the vote to get
if
on
Webb
top.
and Vaz hadn't stood, Labour probably would have won.
So it may be the only Conservative
Nicola,
gain of the night.
I'm being told that quite a few seats in Glasgow are going Labour.
Yeah.
Which is not surprising. This is presumably what you've heard.
Yeah. I think the SNP will lose, all of these SNP Labour seats to Labour tonight. I'm deeply disappointed and upset about that. A lot of my good friends are losing their seats tonight. And remember, every MP who loses has got a team of staff who are also losing their jobs. So we should remember the human impact of that. But, in Scotland, we'll need to see the shakedown of the results and how the votes have gone. But, yes, there have been issues about the SNP, and it would be wrong for me to say otherwise, but the context of this election in Scotland was overwhelmingly kick the Tories, get the Tories out, and the SNP will have suffered from that tonight.
It is interesting though, isn't it? Because if you go back a year and a half, when Boris Johnson was very unpopular, when Liz Truss was very unpopular, I think people thought Labour could get to 10 to 20 seats, and they're going to do a lot better than that. So it's either because compared to a year ago, the Tories are even more unpopular, or that the events in the SNP since you departed have caused a bigger problem for the SNP. I mean, which of those is it? Is it the Tories?
It may be a mix of the two. I think the Tories are more unpopular. I think there has been a cumulative effect in terms of public views of the Tories. And remember, the Tories start from a lower base in Scotland, although they've been boosted a bit by unionist sentiment in recent years. And of course, events in the SNP, the fact that the SNP is a government of such longevity, and this is a tough time to be in government. So all of that is playing in a perfect storm, if you like, for the SNP. But there's a real resilience as well to the SNP vote that I suspect we'll see over the next couple of years. And as long as we don't learn the wrong lessons from what happens tonight, I would still be, confident might be too strong a word right now tonight, but I would still be optimistic that the SNP will be re-elected to government in.
But it's better for Labour than I thought. It's worse. It's worse than you expected.
So, throughout this campaign, I have been expecting what has unfolded tonight. I think we've had private conversations over the last couple of days where I've been predicting that. So it's not a surprise to me in the context of the campaign. I think the SNP fought a spirited campaign. I've already, talked about some of the things that I think there might be reflections on. But yeah, maybe 6 months ago we would have been hopeful of a better result than this, but I think the context of this election has always meant that this was going to be a really tough night for us.
Yeah, I've got some news that Ed will want to hear, which is Andrea Jenkins, who is the Conservative candidate who beat him, has lost, and Labour has retaken your old seat. Oh, the new version of your old seat.
How do you feel about that, Ed?
Underwhelming. Thank God, Ed looks so thrilled. Well, if you're missing the close-up on his face,
Dame Andrea Jenkins.
Okay.
May I say that George Osborne chose to have Dame Andrea Jenkins introduce his conference speech in 2015 after she defeated me, and since then he's become less of a fan of hers.
Well, I did actually. She did put a quote for me on her leaflets, which obviously didn't work in Leeds.
She was the only one. Because she was the only one who asked.
So, in all seriousness, though, because Nicola was just saying, like, you know, at the end of the day, this is a great night if you're winning and a terrible night if you're losing. I know you didn't actually get to lose and be fired because you managed to walk away at the right time, but Ed lost his seat. George, you effectively knew your political career.
I lost many elections before I started winning, though, so You know, I know what it feels like to lose.
But like, what are you feeling when you lose? I mean, like your career, you know, both of you know instant career finish.
It was funny. I think for me, actually, there was a particular moment when it really hit home because I wasn't expecting to lose, and then sat on my own in a Premier Inn room for 7 hours as the results unfolded, and you rationalise it, and you think actually it's a majority government, better to be out. Worked out my speech, was whisked away. Actually, I said to my campaign team, who were kind of all being very kind of despondent, you had a good time. I said to him, I've not died. We then went back to my agent's house, and his wife came out with a bottle of sherry and 20 glasses, poured a sherry toast, and they all basically toasted my political demise. But anyway, it was all funny, okay, whatever. And then I find out that my son, who was 13, had sat up all night with my father-in-law to see my result, and finally saw it at 8:10 to see me lose. My daughter had a GCSE in drama, and she'd gone off to school and turned round and came back because she said, unless I know this result, I can't do my exam. And actually, it was when I finally saw them later in the day and they were upset. That was the thing which was upsetting. It's finding out the people who care about you are so upset. That was the first time I shed a tear. But other than that, I was quite robust about it, but the people you love who are upset, that's really tough.
I mean, the thing is, it's a bit like one of those sort of car crashes where you get out of the car and you think you're okay, and actually there's a huge shock. And I think it takes people a couple of years to get over. Because politics is so all-consuming, and it's often something you've spent years getting to the point where you get to top. And so, my advice often to people who go through similar things, and there'll be a lot of people I know who've lost their jobs tonight, is just take a bit of time, take a breath, take a deep breath. Because people will be completely lost tomorrow morning.
Is that the same even when you choose to leave? Obviously, you've had a rough time since, which we
the transition out of
about,
high office is really tough, and I think George is right. It's often, weeks, even months later, until you properly comprehend and start to process that. And I think, for cabinet ministers losing their seats tonight, it will be horrible. There will be no immediate silver lining. But, they're spared, I guess, the sort of prospect of going to the backbenches in an opposition party. So, and, that's something I've experienced, going from being First Minister to being a backbencher. I've chosen to stay in Parliament. I love serving my constituents. But the 1 foot in, 1 foot out makes it a bit tougher sometimes. So, these are tough situations. And fundamentally, we're talking about human beings here, many of them not elected politicians, but staffers, and it's tough.
OK, here we go. Islington North. Jeremy Corbyn, has he beaten the official Labour candidate?
Vikas Agarwal, Liberal Democrats, 1,661. That's 1661. Jeremy Bernard Corbyn, commonly known as Jeremy Corbyn, Independent, 24,000. That's 24,120. That's 24120. Karen Ann Harries, the Conservative Party candidate, 1,950. 1950. Paul Dominic Jostling, 32. Sheridan Virginia Cates, commonly known as Sheridan Cates, Green Party, 2,660. That's 2660. Praful Nagan, Labour Party. 16,870. That's 16873. Martin John Nelson, Reform UK, 1,710. So that's 17110. Total number of ballot papers rejected is as follows. Want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more candidates than the voter was entitled to, 72. Writing or mark by which the voter could be identified, 1. Being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty, 116. Turnout percentage of the poll, 67.5. And I do hereby declare that the said Jeremy Corbyn is duly elected to serve as a Member of Parliament for the Islington North constituency.
Well, there we are. What a result in Islington North.
I mean, that is so hard.
Keir Starmer is not having it all his own way tonight. Let's hear what Jeremy Corbyn... well, we're going to cut away from Jeremy Corbyn because I'm going to have to take you to Clacton to see whether Nigel Farage has made it.
OK. I am now going to declare the result of the Clacton constituency Member of Parliament. I, Ian Davidson, being the acting returning officer at the election for a Member of Parliament for the Clacton constituency on Thursday, the 4th of July, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Bensilem Matthew, Liberal Democrats, 2016. Farage Nigel Paul, Reform UK, 21,225. Jameson Craig, Climate Party, 48. Mac Tony, Independent, 317. Osborne Natasha, Green Party, 1,935. Owusa Nepal Jovan, Labour Party, 7,448. Pat Anastu Tassos, Heritage Party, 33. Pemberton Andrew, UKIP No to Illegal Immigration, 116. Watling Giles Francis, the Conservative Party candidate, 12,820. The number of ballot papers rejected was 111. I therefore do hereby declare that Nigel Paul Farage is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Clacton constituency. Congratulations.
That's a massive result for Nigel Farage. Not just a win, but a very clear one. We're getting a lot of results all over the place at the moment. Kemi Badenoch is back, no big surprise. A safe seat there. Stephen Flynn is back. We were talking about him, the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons. And here is Nigel Farage.
It's been a well-run, well-fought and remarkably clean election battle. I think we'd all agree on that, and thank you for your services. I promise that I will do my absolute best as a Member of Parliament. I had 20 years as an MEP, but it's not quite the same link or same responsibility with constituents. I will do my absolute best to put Clacton on the map. I'll do my best to bring more tourists. I'll do my best to try and bring some private investment. It's over 30 years ago that I fought my first parliamentary by-election, and I've fought lots of them over the years, and I've had big successes in European elections and perhaps less so under first past the post, which is a very demanding, very, very demanding problem for smaller parties. I will say this, it's 4 weeks and 3 days since I decided to come out of retirement and throw my hat in the ring. I think what Reform UK has achieved in those just few short weeks is truly extraordinary. Given that we had no money, no branch structure, virtually nothing across the country, we are going to come second in hundreds of constituencies. How many seats we're going to win, I don't know. But to have done this in such a short space of time says something very fundamental is happening. It's not just disappointment with the Conservative Party. There is a massive gap on the centre-right of British politics, and my job is to fill it. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. But it's not just what we do in Parliament as a national party that matters, it's what we do out round the country. Getting 5,000 people in that room in Birmingham last week, the energy, the optimism, the enthusiasm, the belief that Westminster is just completely out of touch with ordinary people says to me that my plan is to build a mass national movement over the course of the next few years and hopefully be big enough to challenge the general election properly in 2029. What is interesting is there's no enthusiasm for Labour, there's no enthusiasm for Starmer whatsoever. In fact, about half of the vote is simply an anti-Conservative vote. This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly. We will now be targeting Labour votes. We're coming for Labour, be in no doubt about that. I want to thank the team that have helped me do this over the last few weeks, my fellow candidates for behaving as impeccably as they have. Believe me, folks, this is just the first step of something that is going to stun all of you. Thank you very much.
OK, thank you, though.
Thank you very much indeed.
All kinds of results coming in here. Jonathan Ashworth, key shadow cabinet member, we think has lost his seat.
That's it. Has lost his seat.
Has he lost his seat? OK.
We just saw a seat in Leicester East, which is a Hindu seat, go to the Conservatives, Hindu Conservative candidate. This is Leicester South, a big Muslim seat. This is a Muslim independent, anti-Gaza war candidate, has beaten Jonathan Ashworth, who, of course, was expected to be one of the big Labour figures in the next cabinet.
It feels like this is big, not just for tonight, but because it's going to give an indication of the problems that Keir Starmer may have as leader, right?
This is very significant and very bad news for Keir Starmer, because it shows that his ambition of unifying the nation, which is, what he constantly says he wants to do. He's got this phrase, country first, party second. At the moment, it's singularly failing. There are big and important communities who would traditionally have supported the Labour Party who are rejecting Labour, particularly over Keir Starmer's stance on Gaza.
I mean, we have to say, though, that still the largest proportion of Muslims are supporting the Labour Party. It's just that it's...
But it's still John Ashworth would... under your exit projections, Ashworth was supposed to win.
Definitely. We talked about Greens and small parties earlier. I think Labour was worrying about Shabana Mahmood in Birmingham Ladywood, Thang Debonair in Bristol Central, Rishanara Ali as well in East London. Jonathan Ashworth, though, was not on the radar of where the risks were. I mean, and it's not something that I had heard talk of. And, I was saying earlier with the Chingford seat that Keir Starmer's people, I said to you, that they will think it's a price worth paying, but actually it may be quite a big price which Keir Starmer is going to pay in this Parliament. So these tensions...
I'll tell you one thing which is quite interesting about this, because I've obviously been talking to Labour a lot about the actual mechanics of the campaign. I suspect one of the reasons Ashworth has lost is because it wasn't on their radar as a seat that was at risk. They only had limited resources and they ploughed them into the seats they needed to take from the Tories in order to get over the line. And I suspect what happened was they sort of thought, it's, Ashworth's a done deal, we don't have to worry about it.
I mean, I think, look, first of all, I feel sorry for him because he's run this campaign. Yeah. He's a bit like Chris Patton.
Yes,
30 years ago, helps mastermind a win and loses himself. I think there are lots of clues of the problems Labour are going to have, despite the big majority. The vote share is not going to be high. It may be less than Corbyn got even in 2019 and certainly less than 2017. And, Jeremy Corbyn's election in Islington, these problems we're just seeing, is a sort of shape of things to come. And then I just thought, there was Nigel Farage saying, general election 2029. He doesn't want to talk about the 2024 election anymore. 2029, I'm coming after Labour. And I think that is going to be the story, of British politics, unless the Conservative Party can get its act together in the next few years. And, I just sort of felt, gosh, we're going to, maybe we're all going to be sitting around this table again in 4 or 5 years' time? And is it really going to be Farage's big push against Labour? And will the left coalition have started to fray in the way you've just had little tiny straws of tonight, even on a night when Labour's won so
Okay,
well?
I just want to mention, because we haven't talked about Northern Ireland at all yet tonight, that Geoffrey Donaldson's old seat of Lagan Valley, a DUP seat, has been lost. Now, Geoffrey Donaldson's obviously not standing for the reasons you will know, but that is clearly a blow to the DUP. Would have perhaps hoped.
Who's won it, though?
Who's won it?
That I will tell you as soon as I am informed. But
the
APNI,
the Alliance were in second place there, but it was quite a significant swing they needed. But I think there's another seat that the Alliance might win in Belfast East, with their leader Naomi Long is standing, and that's the DUP leader Gavin Robinson. So this could be the DUP thrown up in the air yet again.
Wow. And interestingly, Great Yarmouth, I mean, that was a Labour target. Previously a Labour seat.
Yes.
We're calling that for reform. So that is reform beating Labour to a seat rather than the Tories.
And a little footnote there, the reform candidate, there's a chap called Rupert Lowe, who's the chair of Southampton Football Club, Rishi's favourite affiliation.
We have not heard a word from Rishi Sunak tonight. Completely disappeared. No tweet, nothing. No.
Or really from any senior.
Well, I think, to be fair, you don't tend to say anything as the Prime Minister until you go to your own count. And unfortunately, he's got one of the most rural and largest seats in the country. So it's going to be quite late by the time they've got all the ballot boxes together. I mean, what I notice, certainly on this show, is that we've got the people who are going to be the Foreign Secretary, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Health Secretary coming on this show, the Deputy Prime Minister. And apart from Robert Buckland, who did the honourable thing at the beginning, come on, the Conservatives don't want to talk.
Okay, Diane Abbott is back. Not a surprise. Could we just listen to Jeremy Corbyn's speech now? Should we just go back and have a listen to what he's got to say?
Win as an independent is hard.
Yeah.
But it's quite an achievement for Jeremy Corbyn to do that.
It was a positive one. Our campaign did not get into the gutter of politics, as is too often happening in this country. Ours is a positive campaign trying to bring hope to people who are in housing stress, who are homeless, who are going through mental health difficulties, who are worried about their future. And the political system has to produce answers to those concerns and those worries. Demonising refugees, demonising people from other countries won't solve those problems. The only way we solve the problems of our community is by uniting our communities. And our campaign was utterly determined to bring that degree of unity to it. And so this result is, to me, a resounding message from the people of Islington North that they want something different, they want something better, and in the new government that's coming in, they're looking for an end to things like the two-child benefit policy cap. They're looking for regulation of the private rented sector. And if I may say so, they're also looking for a government that on the world stage will search for peace, not war, and not allow the terrible conditions to go on that are happening in Gaza at the present time. So this was a grassroots campaign that isn't going to disappear, isn't going to go away. It's brought together people from all walks of life, from all ethnic communities, from all languages and all ages, in a determination to get something better in our society. My job in Parliament will be, as it's always been, to deal with the individual problems that many of our people face, but to speak up where necessary in criticism in order to bring about the social changes that this country needs and my constituency needs. And I'm humbled and proud and very grateful to the people of Islington North, who I've represented for so long and have taught me so much. I owe my life and my learning and my abilities entirely to the people of Islington North. This victory is a dedication to them, and steadfastness in the face of opposition, steadfastness in the face of abuse. We have shown what kinder, gentler, more sensible, more inclusive politics can bring about. I couldn't be more proud of my constituency than I am tonight, and proud of our team that brought this result. Thank you very much, Islington North, for the result that we've achieved tonight. Thank you.
Quite emotional, Jeremy Corbyn. I think at the end there, perhaps no surprise, given a big victory for him against the odds, one might say. Ed, does the party have no choice at some point but to welcome him back in, or hell would freeze over before Keir Starmer will ever even contemplate such a thing?
Well, so far, Jeremy Corbyn has not been willing to do what Keir Starmer wanted him to do in order to come back in, and I don't think Keir Starmer is the kind of guy who's minded to give much ground on this issue. So my instinct is a long standoff, but it will become increasingly painful standoff.
I'm not sure. Do you really think it's going to be painful for Starmer? He's a sort of, he'll be a lone critical voice, but he can't really make.
He'll make common cause with others, though, won't he? Inside the party.
But I mean, how many? But how many actually in Parliament? I should just point out one thing, though. He did this thing saying it was a wholly positive campaign. Actually, his campaign was mostly about highlighting how the Labour candidate had made a lot of money out of private healthcare. And so I wouldn't say that was hugely positive in terms of an agenda for Britain, but there we are.
Do you think also this Gaza, Gaza-Israel is going to be the first big policy issue that hits Starmer like tomorrow? I mean, you've got Joe Biden trying to negotiate a peace deal in Israel.
Sorry, we're in Milton. We're in
Carmarthen, the Chief Whip, Simon Hart.
Is he gone?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I, Helen Jones, returning officer for the Carmarthen constituency, declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Beasley William Dominic, Plaid Werth Cymru, Wales Green Party, 1,371, 1,371. Beckett Nicholas Paul, Welsh Liberal Democrats, Democratiaid Rhyddfryddol Cymru, 1,461, 1,461. Cole Nancy Ellen, Women's Equality Party, 282, 282. Davies Celia Ann, Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales, 15,520, 15,520. Evans David Mark, Workers' Party of Britain, 216, 216. Hart Simon Anthony, Ceidwadwyr Cymreig, Welsh Conservatives, 8,825, 8,825. Holton Bernard, Reform UK, 6,944, 6,944. O'Neill Martha Angharad, Welsh Labour, Llafur Cymru, 10,985, 10,985. Felly, yr oedd yn rhoi hysbyddiad cyhoeddus fod Davies Celia Ann wedi ei ethol fel aelod seneddol dros etholaeth Caerfyrddin. Therefore, I give public notice that Davies Celia Ann is duly elected as
the Chief Whip, Simon Hart, is out. Plaid Cymru's second seat in Wales. We've also just been told that the Greens have won a seat in Bristol. Bristol Central. Thangam Debonair is out. The Shadow Culture Secretary, Carla Denyer, the joint Green leader, is in. Colin, that's a pretty big development.
The Greens are targeting 4 seats in this election. I think this is the first one we've actually heard from, and they've won Bristol Central, I suspect, probably quite handily, full of young people. Some controversy, I think, surrounding Thang and Debonair with between her and some of her constituents. It's quite a redrawn seat, but she had a very, very safe majority at the last election. But other things have been going on, Tom, as well. And there's one thing I've been wanting to say all night. I got a list of seats here that have been Conservative since ever, and we've just heard that one has gone Labour. It's been Conservative since 1885 at Bury St Edmunds, where I believe one of Rishi Sunak's spads was lately posted in the Will Tanner, was
Deputy Chief of Staff.
Lately flown into that seat. And it seems that something else that's really hard to talk about for Jane or I as kind of analysts is that people do not like being taken for granted. And that seems to be increasingly what we're beginning to see in some of these results, where candidates who've got no association, the Richard Holdens, the Will Tanners, in some cases, where you try to get rid of, the person in the Labour candidate in Chingford and so have you. People are taking notice of those things within their own constituencies.
And they're right. I mean, there was enormous anger there when Will Tanner was placed. There was no contest, and local Tories were furious.
I mean, can I ask our polling gurus? It feels to me like, there's so much volatility in this election. There's unbelievable swings happening. Electoral records being broken, but all sorts of things happening that you would never have you don't get the uniform Labour swing. You get Labour MPs losing. You get members of the shadow cabinet losing even on the night when they have this historic win, and you've got to feel, and you've got. The Labour leader's vote in his own constituency going down on the day he becomes the Prime Minister with a huge majority. It just feels unbelievably volatile, unbelievably uncertain. And let's be absolutely clear, as we've been right from the start, an amazing Labour achievement. Yeah. But it feels on quite unstable ground.
This is something that we've seen growing over years, right? So the growth in people switching between parties has been a trend over time. I guess the exceptions to this rule, really, were 2017 and 2019, where switching dropped a bit. Brexit kind of unified people behind the two largest parties. Those were the exceptional elections. And in a sense, we're going a little bit back to how we were in 2015.
Jane, I'm just going to come in because we are going to go to Chichester to see Gillian Keegan, I think, probably losing her seat.
Yeah. High Sheriff of West Sussex, being the returning officer at the election of a Member of Parliament for the Chichester constituency, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Brown, Fuller, Jessica, Sean, Louise, Liberal Democrats, 25,540. Collins, Thomas, Labour Party, 3,175. DeSantis, Theresa, Reform UK, 7,859. Emerson, Andrew, Independent, 190. Keegan, Gillian, the Conservative Party candidate, 13,368. Young, Timothy Peter John, Green Party, 1,815. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Voting for more candidates than voter was entitled to, 23. Writing or mark by which voter could be identified, 6. Being unmarked or wholly...
Gillian Keegan, not out by a bit. That is a pretty overwhelming result. There was a lot of discussion that Chichester would be pretty close, that even in a big swing election that she would lose, but, you know, and that's a big loss.
Again, somewhere where there's been some local government activity by the Lib Dems, which is often what they do to build up their performances. We've also heard that Wokingham, John Redwood's old seat, has gone to the Lib Dems. But even for me, an interesting thing about the Chichester result, if you wander down to the English Channel in Gillian Keegan's ex-constituencies and gaze out south across the water, you will find the Isle of Wight, and Labour have just gained a seat on the Isle of Wight.
In Chichester, what we're seeing here is this anti-Conservative vote. So we're seeing a Reform increase because Reform didn't stand there last time, but we're also seeing the Green and the Labour vote share go down. So that's very likely to be tactical voting to get the Liberal Democrats in first place to oust a Conservative. The Green vote, of course, you know, being very, very slightly down there, because of tactical voting, doesn't negate the fact that that Green victory in Bristol is a really big deal for the Greens, who have been trying to get that additional seat for a really long time. And their vote share is very likely substantially up on what it was last time. So the Greens were just under 3% nationally last time, probably double that this time, which in the big scheme of things, 6 doesn't sound like a lot, but a double in your vote share and having an influence right across the board too.
I mean, just worth pointing out, and partly because you were talking to the Reform Party's deputy leader earlier. He didn't win in Suffolk West, but it's a rare example of the Tories being able to bring in some new blood. Nick Timothy, who